Now, Genesis, the first stories in Genesis are, what would you say? Unidentifiably ancient. God only knows how old they are. The story of Noah, here's an interesting thing. I know this guy he's a Quackawak tribal member and an artist who lives on the tip of of Vancouver Island. And the culture he comes from is about 14,000 years old, something like that. And maybe it's been unbroken for 14,000 years, very long period of time. And he's not literate, this guy, although he's very intelligent, has a great memory, and is also a great artist. And he's told me some of the stories that have come down through the Quack tradition. And he was educated by his grandparents who were original language speakers, and he's an original language speaker. So there aren't many people like that left. I think there's only 3,000 in his particular tribal group. They have a story that's the flood story, except it's canoes. And it isn't a dove, it's a crow, but the damn story is exactly the same. It's like, well, what the hell's up with that? In fact, at the end, it's not a canoe, it's a bunch of canoes that are tied together. And at the end, the canoes all break apart, and that's why there are people all over the world. It's like the story of the Tower of Babel, which I'm going to talk to you about today. The reason I'm telling you that is because the stories at the beginning of Genesis are extraordinarily old. Now, so maybe he tells the same story that we tell, making the presumption that we are the people who are part of this Judeo-Christian tradition, and I know that that's not the case for everyone. Either he's telling the same damn story and it emerged from a central point so long ago that it's 20,000 years or 30,000 years or maybe 50,000 years since we moved out of Africa, something like that, and the story has survived, which is certainly possible because you think, can an oral tradition survive that long? That's the wrong question. Oral traditions always survive that long. What's radical is that they disappear. We're the radicals. The oral tradition is something that stays the same generation after generation. So how much innovation do you think there is in a small tribal group? None. That's why they don't have advanced technologies. They stay the same. The stories stay the same. So the idea that they can be transmitted unchanged over thousands and tens of thousands of years is really not a debatable proposition. It's the norm. So either the stories emerged from a central source and have never been lost so that you can pick them up everywhere, or there's something about the stories that automatically regenerates themselves. And I suppose it's a little bit of column A and a little bit of column B. It's like my nephew, when he perceived himself as a dragon-slaying knight. It's like, well, was that the continuation of an oral tradition, or was it something that he spontaneously come up with? And the answer is both. The pattern was there, he just had to see it, and he saw it and synthesized it and encapsulated it in his own imagination. Well, that's not much different than the oral tradition being unbroken. It's just a variant of the same thing. I mean, if you lose a story but everyone acts it out, you can reconstruct the story, right? And if everyone doesn't act it out, then the culture dies, because there's some things about the story that you have to act out if your culture is going to survive. That's the hypothesis. And then that would be where you would search for ultimate values. The stories that enable you as an individual to flourish in such a manner that your culture flourishes in a way to enhance your flourishing, right? That's the right way that you want to organize things. You know that's what you do inside a family if it's functioning well, right? The family functions so that every individual benefits from being in the family, and that strengthens the family. That's what Piaget called an equilibrated solution. Technically speaking, when he was looking for the origin of moral ideas, he came up with the idea of equilibrated state. And an equilibrated state is one, the three of you are in an equilibrated state. If you all want to be in that state, and while you're in that state, the things that you're doing together work better and they facilitate each of your development. Right, so it's the stacking of a set of ethical propositions so that the individual benefits at the same time as the group. And you can increase that stacking. We could say, well, it's not only that. You want to organize yourself so that all three of you get what you want better than you would if you were alone, and so that you're healthy. And so the stacking also occurs all the way down the physiological chain. You want to be manifesting yourself in the world so that you remain as physiologically healthy as you possibly can. So your stress responses are properly balanced and all of that. And then maybe your equilibrated state is well enough developed so it doesn't just include the three of you. It extends outward beyond you into the greater community. And things stack like that. And that's, if they all get stacked up, every level is stacked on top of each other properly, you have an equilibrated state. And I don't think that that's any different than a vision of paradise. I think those are the same thing.